Hey everyone, Ben Griffin here with Brian Quigley on the B4Podcast, episode 5. Today we're going to kind of venture down a hole. We're going to talk about the topic of megachurches and, the good, the bad. What is a megachurch? Is it just a Western thing? The answer is no, but does this style of church need reform? Do we continue doing it? Do we need bigger churches? A lot of people would say yes. Do we need more churches? These are the type of questions that kind of came up when discussing this topic. So without further ado, Mr. Quigley.
Yo.
What is a megachurch? Your thoughts on that?
It's a church that's mega. No. I mean, yes, I guess. So I think the term megachurch means that your congregation is over 2,000 active members. I believe that's kind of the threshold for megachurch. So that's the textbook definition. Now, there's a lot of nuance to that, which I know you want to get into, but I think that's kind of that's the number. It's like 1,500 to 2,000.
Okay.
Active congregants.
And that's like official. Sounds pretty official.
Yeah. I'll have to look it up. Maybe while you're doing your thing, I'll look it up just to make sure I'm not telling tales out of school.
Yeah. Seems like it might be a tale. But so you're saying that congregant size is the main, attribute for a megachurch. Now,
well, what I'm saying is that's the definition of, like, the textbook definition of a megachurch. So again, I'm looking it up while you're pulling up your next question.
Sure.
There.
But so I guess in the United States, I feel like there's a lot of churches that have, 2,000 or more congregants or members or active members, like whatever you want to say in that regard. But they also all kind of look the same and function. What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. So first off, a megachurch is defined as a Protestant congregation with an average weekly attendance yes, of 2,000 or more adults and children. There's over 1,700 such churches in the U.S. They typically feature charismatic leadership, extensive programs, and suburban locations. Average attendance is around 4,000, with some exceeding 10,000. So that's the textbook definition, and the definition kind of went into what you were describing, where there's a lot of sameness. So yeah, I do agree that a megachurch is, the attendance obviously kind of makes it a megachurch, but kind of how you get there is the style, right? So other churches that have come before that have these massive congregations, churches that want to get to that size go, well, they're doing it right because they have these huge congregations, whatever doing it right means. And so we're going to copy that so we can get that congregation size going.
So you kind of went down the road of like methodology, and I know you can kind of mix that in with style. So are all megachurches 501c3s, and do they all have the same methodology? How, like a business style methodology?
I mean, I can't speak to every megachurch, obviously, but
you're gonna have to. Subject matter expert.
Yeah, sure. What I will say is the church that we attend was actually not technically a 501c3 for a couple of decades. It was just never something we got around to doing. So we were paying them taxes.
Yeah.
So we did eventually get the 501c3 status, but so I would say it's not a requirement to become a megachurch. It's obviously beneficial because for the amount of land and size of properties and the amount of properties, things that you're purchasing for the ministry, it's definitely helpful. But anyway, that's an aside. You were asking a question about kind of the worldview and kind of how mega churches run as far as like their religious practices. I think there are some variations in how the mega churches operate. You noted astutely there that it said Protestant because there are Catholic churches and there are Orthodox churches that can approach or even exceed some of those sizes, but
their structure is totally different.
Correct. They have dioceses, and their money like goes up to a larger organization, and so that's kind of how that's structured. I would say 90+% of mega churches are evangelical, non-denominational type churches. There might be some Baptist churches in there. There might be some other denominations in there, but I would say the overwhelming majority are in that vein.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember, was it First Baptist of Orlando? It's a mega church.
Yeah.
I mean, so I guess they're Baptist. I don't know what kind of creeds and, things that they espouse, but probably something Baptist.
Well, I would say our church was a Baptist church originally before we went non-denominational. So we were part of the Baptist consortium and then decided to kind of go a different direction. So again, I don't think these things are requirements for it. That's why it just says Protestant specifically. But yes, there are a lot of churches that are either that's why I mentioned Baptist as the secondary, because I would say 75% of the churches are not denominational, and then you have 90% of the rest of the difference is probably Baptist, and then depending on where where everything sits, you could throw charismatic type teachings in there, and so then but once you're in non-denomination land, it's kind of hard to describe what the church is other than to look at their belief statements.
Yeah, that's very true. So kind of moving on from there, you described some things about style, structure.
Mm-hmm.
For megachurches, I know this is very op-ed, but good or bad? What do you think? And I guess we'll start with the good.
Yeah, I would say the good with mega churches is pretty much anyone can come to a mega church and feel, if the mega church is running properly, they can feel like they belong. Style of music is primarily CCM, but there's other stuff, that gets mixed in there. And there's a lot of different programs for a lot of different types of people, everything from, kids, students, men's, young adults, people that are 60 plus, sports ministries, missions. Mega churches usually have a pretty wide gamut of ministry focus, which it's a pro and a con, but I would say on the pro side, if you have a passion for missions, they're going to have a program. If you have a passion for sports, they probably have a program. So I think if you come into a mega church and say, hey, this is where I'm gifted and here's how I like to serve the Lord, they're not going to say, well, you got to go to the church down the street because we don't do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I'm just laughing because, I guess it doesn't really require some sort of building or community to go preach the gospel or to do certain things that we're called to do. So That's my only comment with that. But I would say, you kind of said there's a sense of belonging with these megachurches, and I would challenge that. I would say maybe you can develop a sense of belonging in community, but I feel like you can do that with almost any church. And the thing about megachurch is, like, I can walk in the doors, listen to some worship, participate, and just walk out, and nobody would say a word. It's just like a drop in a bucket.
Well, and that's why I said they're doing it correctly.
Oh.
So if you go to, the small Episcopal church up the street, let's say, right, and you go in there and it's very liturgical, and they do things a very certain way, and you may not feel like you fit there because of the style of worship, and I guess you could say the same thing for megachurch as well, but the reason I bring that up, the liturgical nature of it, is because modern people expect modern, accouterments. Now, I know where you're going to go with that, but that's
I'm not going anywhere, man.
Yeah. So when you're doing a, I would say a seeker sensitive church, right? You're trying to appeal to the widest audience possible. So there's a bunch of Episcopal churches and Baptist churches and stuff that are tiny, and they're great, and they do what they're doing exceedingly well. But a lot of those congregations, they get up to a couple hundred, and then they grow old, right? Everyone stays at the church, and they're fully invested, and they have all the relationships and all that. And they might even be preaching the gospel and hosting the little dinners at their house and inviting people and all that. But the church in and of itself is not growing, so the congregation gets older and older, then it dies out. And then the church closes down, or someone else has to take it over. So I think a pro of what I would consider like a multi-generational church is that you always have, again, good or bad, there's a pipeline, there's a machine happening. So there's always people coming in, there's always people going out, there's always people in the middle. So there's always a way to keep everything rolling, instead of this church got established, we got up to 200, the community's involved, they love the Lord, they're all going to heaven, whatever, all the stuff. Like it's a great church, but then the church gets old, the pastor retires, and they just have to shut the church down because there's nobody coming after them to keep the church going. There was no battle plan to consolidate or do something else.
Yeah, it reminds me of a saying that I hear often. Good things grow. I'm butchering it. Growing things change.
Healthy things grow. Growing things change.
Yeah, there you go. Like I said, butchered it, but yeah, like having a plan of for the next generation is super important.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we kind of, all the expectations, the sort of the accouterments and the seeker friendly stuff, and having the amount of giving required to support and sustain that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's like a crossover line with the size, because megachurches seem to be like a certain size, and the ability to sustain like certain giving and income to support like general programs?
Yeah. So generally speaking, megachurches are very program heavy.
Yeah.
And that's how they attract all different types of people. That's how you get the multi-generational feel of a megachurch, because you have stuff for everyone to do. It's like a cruise ship. You go on the ship, and if you want to sit on the sun deck, you can do that. If you want to gamble, you can do that. If you want to go to the arcade, you want to play pool, you want to go to the nightclub, it's like a floating city. And mega churches tend to have all the things to keep people engaged, and to your point, that costs a lot of money, because you need the human resources, either volunteers, paid staff, and then the money to actually, the electricity for the building, paying for the buildings, snacks for the for the small group. And I mean, yeah, when you have 300 small groups and you have bottles of water and chips for everybody, it's like $5,000 for snacks a week. So yes, there's definitely a cost thing going on. Now, you asked a question about, is there kind of a cutover point where
it's like a sweet spot, really?
Yeah, the sweet spot.
I mean, there's got to be, because like I said, the numbers don't lie, and so the church congregant amount happens to always kind of fall in the same same number, or it's at least like in the range of it. So
yeah, I would say the mega churches that are kind of in the 3,000 to 5,000 range are typically are kind of the standard. I think that's what Google was saying. 4,000 is kind of the middle number. There are very large congregations of over 10,000. There's some in Dallas, some in California, up at Chicago, and I do feel like there is a too big. I don't know what that number is, because each region, there's different people live in different areas. Some areas are more affluent, so there's more givers that have more finances to contribute. So I mean, who's to say what the special, like, if I could say, oh, it's $15 million a year, and that was the magic number, but I just can't do that, because each church has its own stuff it's doing for the community, its own donor base. And again, it goes back to, if you have more high capacity givers, those high capacity givers tend to have bigger expectations. So it's like, where's that LED wall? Where's that smoke? Where's
Creflo Dollar? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how big Creflo's church is, but again, that kind of pivots back to the doctrine piece.
Yeah,
making sure the doctrine is sound, and that the money that's being raised is actually going to the things that to the kingdom. It's not just going into the pockets of the pastors to get wealthy so they can have a private jet or whatnot. It goes back to the community. It helps build those programs that allow people to come in from maybe outside the church, like a sports ministry, for example, or missions, where they're coming to church for assistance for something, and we're giving them free food, we're giving them clothing, we're helping them find a job,
True.
Whatever. So all of those things need to be taken into account. So I don't think there's a magic number.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of goes into the big theme of, mega churches are just part of Western culture.
Yeah.
And it's whether it's trendy or whatever it is.
Well,
do we need reform? Does it need to be reformed? That's the big question.
Yeah, I would say there is probably a degree of reformation that needs to happen. Not all mega churches. There are mega churches that do it correctly, but you kind of mentioned like Creflo Dollar and some of these other.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so there's certain pastors and certain teachers that, their job, it's not their job, but their job in their mind is I need to get as much money raised as possible so I can get it in my pocket so that I can benefit from it. And it's not going to the kingdom purposes. And because America is capitalism, right, and everything is bigger in America and all that kind of stuff, it just leads down this slippery slope of, well, we have all this extra money. We don't need to build another building, so let's put a roller coaster on the property, and then people can have fun with the roller, and it gets to a point where it's absurd. And let's say you spent $500,000 building a roller coaster, a small one, so that the kids can play on it. But the insurance, for for 5 kids to be able to ride a roller coaster at a certain time because you have a staff person there. Like, what's the cost benefit analysis of doing that, as opposed to building a field that once it's built and you the grass is laid and you got the lines on the field, now tens of thousands of kids and families can come and play and then hear the gospel presented as they're, in a ministry endeavor. So if you spend $500,000 on, a roller coaster versus $500,000 on a field, that I think that's where you can kind of get, bad taste in people's mouths. Like, oh, that money was well spent. And that money was obviously wasted and blown on things that are not benefiting the kingdom.
Yeah, everybody seems to have an opinion about, money and how it's spent. I think, there's a mixture of thoughts there, because rightfully so, yes, but at the same time, we're not totally submitting to man. We're submitting to God, and when we give, and we know He does what's best at times, and there's corruption. So, like I said, there's a mixture there. I'm not saying it's like one or the other, and like we're totally to submit and just like play it dumb. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, what I would say to that is, if you feel like you can't give to a church because you feel like the money's not being spent well, don't give to that church. But that also means don't attend that church anymore, right? Because if
that's fair,
you're giving to the kingdom, right? So to your point, that money, once it leaves your hands and it goes into the coffers, that's between the administration of the church and the Lord. At that point, you're absolved. Now, if you know that there's nefarious stuff going on and you know that things aren't happening and you're contributing to that, then you need a dip.
Later. Yeah. I understand. And yeah. So yeah, definitely don't want to go down that rabbit hole today. But we talked about some necessary reform in the church, in regards with funds, but what about size? I mean, it should there be a cap and like satellite, churches? Does that count to size? Do we need to just go bigger? I mean, are we too small? Are we thinking, we're not thinking abundance.
Yeah, the Lord can infinitely beyond what we can ask and imagine.
That's right. And I mean, I'm not scoffing at that because I mean that's biblical, but there's always that they use that as a modifier on a lot of those giving campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, again, these are really tough questions, and that's obviously why we're talking about it. But, if you think about it from the standpoint of if you're part of a denomination, right, if you're in the Baptist denomination, then you report to a body, and that body meets at a conference, and member church, leaders, so members go to this body and they have meetings about, how funds are spent, what doctrines considered us part of this thing, this consortium. You also have, like, in a much larger context, you have the Catholic and the Orthodox traditions that are much more hierarchical, and funds go directly up the chain, from the local, what are they called? the local pastors, ministers, up to the bishops, up to the archbishops, back to Rome. So it's very structured. So that's definitely not a new Western idea. The idea of structure within the church has been a long-standing one, but I think in every sense of the word, reform should always be happening within the church, because there needs to be a balance between, hey, we're free and we love Jesus and we're just doing stuff, and hey, I'm accountable to somebody, and if I'm getting out of hand, somebody's there to kind of put me in my place and make an example out of me, as the scriptures say, when leaders are not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, I follow you there.
However,
I guess I kind of go back to you know, churches. Is it just community? Is it what's the big thing that is like makes it a church versus just like a social club at some point? And you know, the equipping of the saints is a big one. And yeah, you know, there's a lot of clubs and different things out there that have structure and that give to the community and you know do like missional type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference between what the body of Christ does versus what they do, for sure, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what I was going to say is the point of the church is not just to go into it and then stay in it, and that's what a social club is. The point of the church is, you said it already, the equipping of the saints. So I almost think of the church like a hospital, right? You're out in battle, right? And you know, we're fighting a spiritual battle, and we're trying to win souls for Christ. We're trying to, you know, thwart the plans of the enemy and all these different things. And then we come back and we're wounded. We need healing. We need to be refreshed. We need to learn more. We need to have, you know, more equipment. You know, we need to resharpen our swords, and then we go back into battle. So a country club or a, you know, whatever, a social club, the point of the club is to enjoy being at the club. Where the church, you can enjoy being there. You can enjoy being at the hospital or the inn or whatever you want to call it while you're getting bandaged up. But the whole point of the church is to go back out and continue to fight for Christ in a spiritual sense. So if that's not happening, then yeah, you're basically a 501c3 social club at that point. So it's very important from an accountability standpoint that that happens. So making sure that social club vibe does not sit. Like there should be a restlessness within the church to go out.
Sure. And it kind of goes to the subject of home churches is where I was like thinking about. Well, because like you go outside of this like mega church community and you're missional, you're preaching the gospel, you're, you know, healing the sick, you're doing like, you know, all the fivefold ministry. But you know, there's one of the fivefolds is like, you know, apostles, I guess. If obviously this depends on your doctrine, your beliefs, but you know what they're supposed to do is, you know, plant churches. So more churches. So
right.
Are we like, and typically like in, at least in the United States, those churches start in the home. And are we to just continue to make more and more churches, or is that like a secondary to, you know, making disciples, or, you know, or do we got it backwards? I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's, again, another difficult question, because sometimes, you know, making a disciple means that you just have a group of people around you and you're doing the thing. Sometimes, depending on the area and what the need is, there needs to be an actual church there so that they can come and they can receive sound teaching and they can learn about what's going on in a larger context. So I would say if you're in Iran or something, right, physical churches are burned to the ground. People are dragged out in the street and killed for being followers of Christ. So in that situation, a home church is perfect, because you know, you can talk to people, the individual discipleship, right? You can talk to people and say, hey, Jesus and all this, and they go, oh, but I can't talk about Jesus because I'm going to get killed. Yeah. Well, just come to my home, you know, home church. So again, it goes back to the idea of what a church is, right? Because a church isn't a building, and at our church we talk about that as well. The church is the people. Now, how you organize it, how much money goes into the coffers to do how many things, that's where it gets tricky. Because again, you can say, well, I'm one church and then I plant campuses, right? That all fall under the the guidance of the one church, or you can go a fully different direction and say, I'm going to I'm going to send these two people out that are really good at planning churches, and they're going to start a whole new thing that's not attached to us. We're going to bless them. We're going to give them funds and help, and we're going to bless and release them, and they're going to start their own ministry. I think the answer is yes. So I think when you open up another campus in a church, you're opening a church. And if you send someone out to start a whole new church, it's a church. If people start a home church, that's a church. So I don't know if that fully answered your question, but I think all those are viable options.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare, but I don't necessarily disagree with you.
Thank you, I guess.
But yeah, making disciples is the goal,
Mm-hmm.
and whether that's in a home, in a mega church style type thing with the good and the bad. I mean, I feel like there with the stuff we discussed about the bad is there's the Lord still works in that environment, in that structure, even though there might be some limitations there. So
yeah. So I think
flawed people everywhere.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up. So I think one, talking about the bad, one thing that can happen that generally doesn't happen in a smaller church, it can, but you tend to get more of a cult of personality in a mega church. Mm-hmm. So when you have thousands of people attending a church, and then celebrities start attending that church, and people of notoriety, then it turns a lot more into what the world sees, as opposed to what Christ sees as the person on the pulpit's responsibility is to deliver the gospel message, and they're a conduit at which Christ speaks through them. But you see some of these megachurch pastors, they're, sliding into a swimming pool of jelly, and they're jumping on trampolines, and they're
swimming pool of jelly.
Yeah, they're covering the Bible with maple syrup, and I mean just crazy things. And it's supposed to be illustrations of a point or whatever, but it gets to the point where it's about you and not about the sermon. It's not about discipling people. It's not about, like, when I leave church, I should feel in a certain sense I should feel at peace, but in another sense I should feel uneasy, right? I should feel like the Holy Spirit is here. He's speaking to me and he's comforting me, but he's revealing something in my life that I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing, and he's tugging on my heart to change it. So if I go to church and I'm not getting that duality of messaging, and I just felt good and that was fun and that was entertaining, and I leave and I don't really learn anything, then I think that's when the leader of that church is not hitting their responsibilities.
Well, I mean, I would say that, you kind of hit on a couple things there. Western society is super consumeristic, and
yeah,
we tend to, what are we getting out of this kind of thing? And, I've always struggled with, do I get fed at church, or am I supposed to feed myself? And am I supposed to serve at church during the church times and, get fed in the secret place, in my alone time with the Lord? So I don't know that answer. I'm just asking it to kind of get it out in the air, but that's a personal thing for me. But yeah, I feel like I get equipped in a way, but ultimately, like, I'm at church to serve. And I mean, I think you would say that, you just didn't say it yet.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that's the congregational responsibility. So the service that the leaders of the church provide is to equip the saints, as you said earlier. And then our responsibility as the congregation is to be the hands and the feet of Jesus. So the boots on the ground. So feeding the orphan and the widow, and, helping the neighbor, pay his rent because he can't, because his wife just died and he's grieving and he lost half his income and he has 2 kids. Like, those are the type of things that, from a congregational standpoint, that's not a country club, right? Because you're not just giving to a fund and then someone else is doing it. Like, you're the one actually being the boots on the ground, and you're also not just doing it altruistically. You're doing it because the Lord has commanded us to do it, and it's because it's the right thing to do, not just because, it makes me feel good about myself.
Well, I feel like serving, it's better to give than receive, as the word says.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so there's like a cathartic feeling when we do serve, that it's not the intent, obviously we're pouring out to others, but I mean, personal thing again is I've been so blessed pouring into other people's lives, more so than what I'm not getting anything out of this kind of thing. So
yeah.
When we set aside the consumeristic aspect of it, I feel like we can in turn be blessed.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, you can feel good while you're serving. I would just say, if that's the primary modus operandi, that's where there's a problem. If the point is, I'm doing this to make myself feel better, or I feel better about myself, that's wrong. But if we're doing it because Christ is commanding us to do it, and then as a result of that, it's kind of like, salvation.
Sure.
It's, we're saved by grace through faith for good works. So like, works doesn't save us, grace does, but works is a sign that we are saved because we're doing what the Lord's commanded. So I would say, in the same way, if we are, if we're called to ministry, which we all are to some degree, then we're going to do the thing and we'll feel good as a result, as
joy
opposed to
and love and fruits of the Spirit. Absolutely, 100%.
Yep.
Not to cut you off, but good, bad, megachurches. Obviously, doctrine totally matters. Any final thoughts on megachurch, the megachurch topic?
Just to sum it up, I think as long as there's sound doctrinal teaching, the people in the church are being convicted and they are growing in Christ, then it doesn't matter if they have an LED wall or not, or how loud the music is, or if they have 50 programs versus 10. It's definitely stylistic and it's different, and there's other people that may like a smaller congregation with a homier, cozier feel. But I think as much as the megachurch people a lot of times get a bad rap for preference, I would say people that attend smaller churches have the same kind of preference. They
Absolutely.
want the traditional music. They want it quiet. They want hymns. They only want 100 people.
Hymns.
Right. I don't know this guy. What's going on with him? Why is this guy at my church? So that's tongue in cheek there, but everyone has preferences, and I think that as long as you find a community where the Lord is moving in your life and you're going forward in your journey and not staying stagnant or going backwards, then you're at a good church, and you should continue to go there, and you should continue to worship, give, serve, do all the things.
Yeah, I guess, and I would say, as long as the church is making disciples, and disciples making disciples,
Mm-hmm.
and just like we said earlier, healthy things grow, growing things change.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got it right.
You did.
Discipleship is huge, and you can preach the gospel. Obviously, the gospel matters, absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
but the commissions to make disciples and to make followers of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
genuine followers of Christ. And I gotta say, with the size of the church, and at least in my experience, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of like the results are the results. Like disciples are made, in the home group. the disciples are made in a medium-sized church and in a larger church as well. And that like challenges me a lot, because I have like a certain, framework in my head, like, oh, this is how it should be, all this stuff. And the Lord's always challenged me in that regard. So, but yeah, let us know if you guys have any questions or, comments about the megachurch topic and, the things associated with it. Maybe you got some better experience or better insight into the structure or just your experience in general. So we'd love to hear from anybody. But that's a wrap for episode 5. We'll see you back in a week or so.
Goodbye
B4.
for now.
Bye-bye.